The first time I saw her, she slid my brother's phone across the kitchen table like a weapon, and I stayed quiet with my fingernails digging into my own palm because I didn't understand why he looked guilty for something he didn't do. Then she smiled at my mom like nothing happened, and I swallowed every instinct screaming at me to say, "Who are you? Really?" My name is Waverly. I'm 23, and I work as a nail tech while I finish my certification hours. My brother Lennox is 25. He's the kind of man who still says please and thank you even when nobody's watching. He grew up in church, kept his promises, and for a long time he stayed single because he said he wanted the right person, not just any person. So when he told me he met someone on a dating app, I expected slow. I expected careful. I expected him to protect his soft heart like it was a candle in the wind. But the relationship moved like a wildfire. 3 weeks after they started talking, he brought her to a family dinner as his girlfriend. Her name was Holland. She was an air stewardess, always in motion, always so exhausted, always with a story about some hotel, some crew, some delayed flight. She wore a perfect smile like makeup. When my dad tried to ask her about her hometown, she answered in little clipped sentences, then stared at her phone like it owed her comfort. At first I told myself she was shy, but then I saw her laughing loud and bright at a restaurant with strangers, touching the waiter's arm like they were old friends, and the introvert excuse crumbled in my head like dry bread. The next time she came over, my mom cooked extra, the way moms do when they're trying to welcome someone into the family. Holland barely ate. She made one comment about the seasoning being interesting, and I watched my mother's smile tighten. My brother laughed too hard, like he was trying to cover up the silence. In the car later, Lennox said, "She's just anxious around families." I nodded because he needed me to. But a week after that, my parents pulled him aside and said gently, carefully, "We've noticed she takes little digs at you." When my mom said it to me, her eyes looked tired. She wasn't trying to control him. She was worried. I didn't want to be the sister who hated the girlfriend on principle. I wanted to be fair. So I stayed quiet and watched. And what I saw was small cruelty dressed up as jokes. If Lennox said he was tired, Holland would smirk and say, "You're always tired." It's giving lazy. If he forgot his keys, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Sometimes I wonder how you survive without me." He would laugh, but his laugh sounded thin. Then came the day he called me and his voice sounded cracked. He said, "Waverly, I think I have an STI." I sat down on the edge of my bed so hard the mattress squeaked. What? He sounded embarrassed, like he was confessing a sin. I got tested because I felt off. "It's chlamydia." My stomach dropped. "Lennox, you told me you were a virgin before her." I was. There was a pause and I could hear him breathing like he was trying not to panic. She says she didn't know. She swears she didn't know. I was trying to stay calm for him. "Okay, people can be asymptomatic. It happens. She needs treatment too," he whispered. She told me I gave it to her. My mouth went dry. How could she even say that? She said it like she believed it. And she told her family that version. I stared at my wall, at a little crack in the paint I'd never noticed before. "So her parents think you cheated?" He didn't answer right away, and that told me everything. After that, things got worse in the way that makes your skin feel tight, like you're waiting for another blow. Holland told Lennox my parents were nasty to her. She had only met them twice, once at dinner and once at a family event where my mom bought her a souvenir shirt because she thought it would be sweet. Holland accepted it with a smile, then later complained that my mom was trying too hard and making her uncomfortable. Then she announced she didn't want to see his family anymore. Not just "I need time" or "I'm overwhelmed." No, it was "Your family is toxic. I don't want them in my life." And my brother, my gentle brother, started shrinking himself to make space for her anger. Around the same time, he discovered she'd been talking to other men. He didn't even find out because he was snooping at first. One of the men called her while Lennox was in the car with her. Her phone lit up. A name, a little heart. The way she snatched the phone down made my brother's face go pale. Later, he told me he saw messages with another guy, and another thread where texts were missing, like someone had been cleaning up evidence. He tried to talk to her about it. She cried. She blamed stress. She blamed her job. She blamed him for making her feel trapped, and he stayed. Then one night, he showed up at my apartment looking like he hadn't slept in days. He held his hands out like he was holding something fragile. "She's pregnant." My mind went cold. "Are you sure?" "She says she is." She showed me a test. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but his eyes were glossy. He looked terrified. I don't know what to do. So I did what sisters do when they're scared too. I steadied my voice. "We're going to handle one thing at a time. You're not alone." The family was suspicious, but nobody wanted to be cruel. If she was pregnant, it was serious. If she wasn't, it was still serious, just in a different way. A month later, Lennox called me again. His voice was low. "I did something I'm not proud of." "What?" I went through her phone. I didn't scold him. I couldn't. Not when his voice sounded like he was standing on the edge of something. "She was in the shower," he said. "I saw messages to some guy I've never heard of. She sent him ultrasound pictures." My stomach flipped. "Ultrasound pictures?" "Yeah, and she said, "I guess I have to stay with him even though I don't want to." I felt my hands start to shake. "She said that about you." He whispered, "I think so." That was the moment the respect I had for their relationship started bleeding out. Not because he was weak, because he was being played like a song she'd practiced. We tried to be smart, quiet, no screaming, no dramatic confrontations that would just make her better at lying. We made a plan, a paternity test, medical proof, paper trails, timelines. Lennox kept going to appointments with her because he wanted to do the right thing, and Holland ate up the attention like it fed her. She started talking about moving into his new house, even though he'd told her no more than once. She'd walk through his living room like she owned it, pointing at walls and saying, "This would look better in a different color," or "We need a bigger couch." I watched my brother's jaw tighten when she said "we," and then he'd soften again when she smiled. One evening, they came to my parents' house, and something in her snapped. She and Lennox got into a full-blown argument in front of my mother. Holland's voice rose into that sharp, slicing pitch that makes your heart race. My mom sat on on the couch, hands folded, looking small. Holland screamed like it was a performance. Lennox kept his voice low, trying not to react, trying not to give her more fuel. Then she stormed out and slammed. The front door so hard a framed picture rattled and fell. Glass cracked. My mom flinched. And Holland didn't even apologize. She just walked around outside like a ghost, trying the doorknob, acting offended that it was locked, while my brother quietly cleaned up broken glass with his head down. I remember thinking, this is not love. This is training. Not long after, she miscarried. The mood in the family shifted into something heavy and complicated. Grief, suspicion, guilt for the suspicion, sadness for my brother, anger at how chaotic everything had become. Holland posted vague things online about loss and strength. People sent her hearts and prayers. She accepted it all like a queen collecting tributes. And my brother kept carrying the weight. Then her parents came into town and invited our family to dinner. It felt too soon, too forced. Like they were trying to place a pretty tablecloth over a cracked table. Lennox asked me multiple times to go. Please, he said, like he needed my presence to prove everything was normal. I told him no. My voice was calm, but my stomach was tight. I don't want to be at a dinner with strangers pretending this is fine. He got quiet. So you're just never going to support me? I support you, I said. I'm not supporting this. He didn't like that answer. A week later, Holland was kicked out of her apartment. She told Lennox it was because she didn't like living there anymore, and she casually hinted his house should solve her problem. But then her roommate contacted him and said, plainly, she hasn't been paying utilities. We're done. That night, I finally said what I'd been holding back. I said, the longer you stay with her, the less you will see me. I'm not spending money on her. I'm not going on double dates. I'm not playing happy family while she disrespects you and us. If she wants change, it has to come from her, and I haven't seen it. He asked if she had any good traits. I said no, and I heard something in him go quiet. Like the last little excuse he'd been holding on to got tired and sat down. Weeks passed with a strange calm. I thought maybe he'd end it. Then out of nowhere, Holland texted me. She asked if I could do her nails before a big trip. I stared at the message for a long time. A part of me wanted to ignore her forever, but another part of me thought, if I stay calm, if I play this smart, I might finally see what she's really doing. And maybe, just maybe, I could help my brother by letting her get comfortable enough to make a mistake. So I said yes. She came to my place with an overstuffed tote bag and a smile that never reached her eyes. She picked two colors, one blue and one pink. When I asked why, she said it matched her outfit. I painted carefully, quietly. I made small talk. She talked about a Disney trip, a race, something meaningful she was honoring, but she never said what. She kept glancing at her phone, typing, deleting, typing again. And while I worked, I noticed something. Every time I asked a simple question, her answers were too smooth, like she'd rehearsed them, like she expected the world to challenge her story, and she'd already built the defense. Quick pause before I keep going. When I'm editing late at night, I get exhausted, and your comments honestly keep me awake. Like, subscribe, and tell me your city, state, or country. All right, now let me take you back, because the next morning, I found out my brother hadn't even wanted to go on that trip. He was trying to save money after buying his house. He'd said no. But Holland's father called him and told him he needed to go because the flight had already been bought without Lennox agreeing. My brother sent me a single thumbs up when I warned him not to go broke at Disney, and something about it felt resigned, like he'd stopped fighting. I didn't hear much after that, not until the last day of their trip. I opened social media and saw Holland's post. She announced publicly what the run was dedicated to: the miscarriage, the loss, the pain, the strength. She wrote like she was speaking for both of them. My heart started pounding because our family had kept it private. My brother had kept it private. I called Lennox immediately. Did you know she was posting this? There was a pause, and then his voice came out small. No, I didn't know until after you did her nails. I sat there with my phone pressed to my ear, staring at the drying polish on my own hands, and I realized I had helped her get ready for something deeply personal that my own brother hadn't even been told about. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. Holland wasn't just careless. She was strategic. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the way she'd sat in my chair, choosing those two colors like they were nothing, while she held a secret my brother didn't even know existed. It wasn't just the post. It was the fact she decided the story belonged to her alone. Like Lennox was a prop she could pose next to when it looked good and shove off stage when it didn't. By morning, my anger had cooled into something sharper. I wasn't going to explode. Exploding would give her a reason. It would hand her a new script where I was the villain and she was the fragile, misunderstood girlfriend. No, if she was going to keep performing, I was going to let her perform into a spotlight she didn't realize was on. So I did the quiet thing. I took screenshots of her post. I saved the date, the wording, the comments where strangers praised her bravery, and the part where she wrote like she was speaking for both of them. Then I saved a screenshot of my brother's text admitting he didn't know. I made a folder on my phone with a boring name like tax stuff because I didn't want to feel dramatic. I wanted to feel prepared. Later that day, Lennox called me again. He sounded tired, like his body was finally catching up to what his mind had been carrying. She said it was her grief, he told me, that she didn't think she needed permission. Grief doesn't erase respect, I said, keeping my voice low. You're allowed to be hurt. He went quiet, and I could hear him breathing. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. She said you've never liked her. She said you're always looking for a reason. Of course she did. I pictured her saying it with that perfect smile. I pictured my brother nodding. Because it's easier to accept someone else's blame than face the truth that you chose wrong. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just asked softly, did she tell you that before or after she posted it? Silence. That was my first quiet question. The kind you can't dodge without revealing yourself. He exhaled. After. Okay, I said. So she hurt you, and then she gave you an explanation where you're the problem for being hurt. He didn't answer, but I heard something shift, a tiny crack in the wall. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in my dark phone screen. I looked older than I had a few months ago. Not in a a cute way. In a way that said, I have watched someone I love get slowly dismantled. That weekend, my parents invited Lennox over for dinner. Just him. No girlfriend, no drama, just spaghetti and a quiet table. He arrived with shadows under his eyes. He hugged my mom too long. My dad didn't lecture him. That was the thing about my parents. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to keep the door open so he'd come back through it. Halfway through the meal, Lennox's phone buzzed. He glanced down and his shoulders tensed. My mom noticed, because moms always notice. She didn't say anything. She just reached over and refilled his water like he was a little boy again. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. She wants to move in. My dad's fork paused. And what did you say? I told her no, Lennox said. Again. And what did she say? My mom asked. Lennox's mouth tightened. She said I'm scared of commitment. She said if I loved her, I wouldn't make her feel unstable. I wanted to laugh, but it wasn't funny. It was the oldest trick in the book. Create a problem, then blame the other person for not fixing the problem you created. My mom's eyes shined, but she kept her voice gentle. Sweetheart, you are allowed to have boundaries. That's not a lack of love. Lennox nodded like he understood, but his fingers kept tapping the table, restless, like his nervous system didn't believe it yet. After dinner, I walked him to his car. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. He leaned against the hood and stared at the ground. I feel stupid, he admitted. You're not stupid, I said. You're loyal. There's a difference. He swallowed. But what if she really changes? That question broke my heart because it wasn't about her. It was about him. He wanted to believe in redemption because he didn't want to accept he'd been used. So I gave him the one thing he needed, not a lecture, but a mirror. Lennox, I said, if someone wants to change, you don't have to beg them to care. He looked up at me and his eyes were wet. He wiped his face quickly like he was embarrassed to be human. For a few weeks after that, I kept my distance the way I'd promised. I didn't ask about her. I didn't invite them anywhere. I answered Lennox when he texted, but I stopped filling in the empty spaces. I let him feel what it was like when the family wasn't constantly cushioning his choices. And quietly I kept my folder updated because the mess kept spilling out. Her old roommate reached out again and told Lennox she'd left unpaid bills. Not one forgotten payment, a pattern. The kind of pattern that says, I will let other people carry what I drop. Then a new thing happened. Lennox started acting like he was trying to convince himself. Too bright, too upbeat. He sent me a picture of them smiling at a restaurant. He texted, we're doing better. I stared at the message until my eyes blurred. Doing better didn't erase what she'd already done. Doing better didn't bring back the trust she'd burned like paper. But I didn't challenge him, not directly. I wrote, I'm glad you're okay. 2 days later, he called me late at night. His voice was whispering and I could tell he was in his house, probably pacing. She's mad, he said. About what? I asked. She saw your name on my phone, he said. She asked why you and I talk so much. My stomach tightened. Your siblings. I told her that, he said, and I could hear the exhaustion. She said you're trying to turn me against her. I closed my eyes. My brother had always been close to me. We'd always been each other's backup. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a person she could isolate until her voice was the only one he trusted. I kept my tone calm. What did you say? I told her you're my sister, he said. I told her you're not going anywhere. Something in his voice sounded proud, like he'd finally drawn a line. And even though I wanted to celebrate, I didn't. I knew better. When you draw a boundary with someone like that, they don't accept it. They punish you for it. The next week, Lennox showed up at my apartment without warning. His face was pale. He looked like he hadn't eaten. He sat down on my couch and stared at his hands. She said something, he began. My stomach sank. What? He swallowed hard. She said she feels like I'm too good for her. I blinked. That was almost funny in a cruel way because it sounded like humility, but it was bait. A compliment disguised as insecurity, designed to make him reassure her. And what did you say? I asked. I told her she's not a bad person, he said. My throat went tight. Of course he did. He was a lover. He would rather comfort someone than accept they're hurting him on purpose. He rubbed his face, and then she asked if I was getting tested again. My heart thudded. Why would she ask that? He looked up, and the fear in his eyes made my skin go cold. I don't know. I didn't accuse. I didn't say the word cheating. I just reached for the quiet proof line. Did something happen on one of her trips? I asked. He stared at me, and for a second he looked like he was going to lie to protect her. Then his shoulders slumped. She's been weird, he admitted. She's been staying up late, guarding her phone. There it was, the same pattern. The same secrecy, the same sinking feeling in my gut that I'd had months ago, back when he first told me about the other men. I kept my voice steady. Lennox, if you feel like you have to become a detective in your own relationship, something is wrong. He nodded slowly. I feel crazy. You're not crazy, I said. You're reacting to inconsistency. That's what your body does when your reality keeps changing. He stared at the floor for a long time. Then he whispered, why do I keep hoping? I didn't answer right away because the truth was heavy. Sometimes we hope because admitting the truth feels like admitting we weren't enough, even though it has nothing to do with us. So I said the simplest thing, because you love deeply. His throat moved like he was swallowing tears. That night, after he left, I did another quiet thing. I went back through my messages. I saved every date, every little detail. Not because I wanted revenge in a loud way, but because I wanted my brother to have something solid when the gaslighting started, when she inevitably tried to rewrite the story again. And then, about a week before Valentine's Day, my phone rang after midnight. It was Lennox. His voice was tight, controlled, like he was holding himself together with both hands. Waverly, he said, can you come over? My stomach dropped. What happened? He swallowed, and I heard a sound behind him like a door shutting quietly. I asked her a question, he said, and I don't think she's going to be able to lie her way out of it this time. I grabbed my keys without thinking and drove to his house with my hands tight on the steering wheel. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel feel like you're the only person awake in the world. His porch light was on. When I stepped out of my car, I could hear a low murmur inside, voices pressed down as if the walls could judge. He opened the door before I knocked. Lennox looked wrecked, not sobbing, not dramatic, just emptied out, like someone had scooped the warmth out of him and left the shell standing. She's in the kitchen, he said. I walked in slowly. The house smelled faintly like laundry detergent and the candle my mom bought him when he moved in, something cozy that didn't match the tension in the air. Holland was sitting at the island, her phone face down. Her suitcase was near the back door, half-zipped, like she was prepared to leave at any second. When she looked at me, her expression was controlled, almost bored, as if this was an inconvenience. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I didn't glare. I stayed calm because calm makes people sloppy. Lennox stood across from her, both hands on the counter, knuckles white. He said, I have one question. Holland's mouth curved slightly, like she was expecting an accusation she could twist. Okay. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He just asked, did you do anything with anyone on your last work trip? She blinked. What? He didn't repeat himself. He just held eye contact, and something in her shifted. Not guilt, not fear. Calculation, like she was weighing which lie would cost her the least. I can't believe you'd ask me that, she said, leaning back. After everything I've been through. Lennox didn't flinch. Answer the question. Her eyes flicked toward her phone, then back to him. You don't trust me. He let out a slow breath. I'm asking because I have a feeling, and I'm done ignoring my feelings. That was the first time I'd heard him say that. It hit me like a punch in a good way. Holland laughed once, sharp and quick. This is insane. Lennox didn't argue. He just said, if it's insane, the answer is no. Silence. A long one. Then she sighed like she was tired of pretending. Fine. My stomach tightened. She picked up her phone, turned it over in her palm, then set it down again as if the phone itself was responsible. I did something, she admitted. Lennox's face didn't change, but his eyes did. They went glassy, like the world had tilted and he was trying to stay upright. What did you do? He asked. Holland spoke like she was reading a report. I met up with someone. Who? Lennox said. She hesitated. A pilot. I felt my jaw tighten. Of course. Someone in her world, someone who understood her schedule, someone she could make feel special in a hotel room and leave behind before dawn. Lennox's voice stayed even. Did you sleep with him? She waved a hand, dismissive. Not exactly. It didn't go that far. Lennox stared at her. So you did something else? Holland rolled her eyes like he was being dramatic. We kissed. Things happened. We were intimate. Lennox didn't move. Define intimate. Her cheeks flushed, not with shame, but with annoyance at having to explain herself. We showered together, okay? But it wasn't sex. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Like she expected him to be grateful. It wasn't the one word she knew would break him completely. Lennox swallowed. His throat bobbed. How old is he? She looked away. Older. How much older? He asked. She sighed again. Like 10 years. 10 years? And she still managed to make it sound like a minor detail. Like she hadn't chosen someone who probably felt powerful in that difference. Lennox's hands left the counter. They shook once, just a little, and then he clenched them into fists and steadied himself. He said softly, so you cheated. Holland snapped. You're making it sound worse than it is. He looked at her for a long moment, and the quiet in his face was terrifying. Not anger, not shouting, just clarity settling in like winter. He said, get out of my house. Holland blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, Lennox said. Pack the rest of your stuff and leave. Her mouth opened like she was going to laugh it off, but then she saw his eyes and realized the old tricks weren't going to work. She stood up fast, chair scraping the floor. You're really going to throw me away? After everything? He didn't argue about everything. He didn't defend himself. He didn't list her sins. He didn't beg her to understand. He just repeated the boundary, the way you repeat a truth you finally believe. Leave, he said. Holland's gaze flicked to me, and for a second I saw the mask slip. Not sadness, not remorse, pure irritation that an audience existed. She turned back to Lennox. You're going to regret this. He nodded once, as if he'd already accepted that regret was better than humiliation. Maybe, he said, but I'm not doing this anymore. That was it. That was the sentence I'd waited months to hear. Holland's hands shook as she yanked her suitcase upright. She muttered something under her breath about how his family poisoned him, how I was controlling, how my parents were awful, how she never felt welcome. I watched her talk herself into being the victim. It was almost impressive how quickly she rewrote the script. And then Lennox did something that made my heart squeeze. He didn't correct her. He didn't take the bait. He just walked to the front door and held it open. Holland stopped in the doorway and turned, like she wanted a final dramatic moment. You're going to miss me, she said. Lennox looked at her, expression steady. No, I'm going to miss who I thought you were. Her face twitched. That line hit her harder than yelling ever could. She stepped outside. Lennox closed the door, and the click of the lock sounded like a final punctuation mark. For a second, he just stood there, staring at the door like it might open again and undo everything. Then his shoulders dropped and his breath came out shaky. I feel sick, he whispered. I moved closer, careful, like he was a wounded animal that might bolt. Come sit down. He sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands. I kept thinking if I loved her enough, she'd stop, he said, voice breaking. I kept thinking if I was patient, if I proved myself, if I did everything right, she would choose me. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You can do everything right and still lose with someone who doesn't care. He nodded slowly, like the words hurt but also relieved him, like someone finally named the monster. Then he said, I don't even know why I stayed. I let him have the silence for a moment. Sometimes the answers need room. Then I asked the one question that mattered now, the practical one that protects the future. Are you going to get tested again? I said gently. He winced. Yeah, first thing. I nodded. Good. You don't owe anyone your health. He rubbed his face and a tear slipped out. He wiped it away fast, angry at himself for crying. I put my hand on his shoulder. You're not weak for feeling. You're strong for leaving. He took a breath. She kept saying I was too good for her. I let out a bitter laugh but kept it soft. Sometimes people say the truth right before they hurt you with it. He looked up at me. Do you think I'm stupid? No, I said instantly. I think you're loyal. I think you believe people mean what they say because you mean what you say." His mouth trembled. He looked away. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. Holland's name flashed across the screen. He stared at it like it was a snake. Then he did something else that shocked me. He turned the phone off. Not blocked. Not argued. Not one last message. Just removed her access to his attention. Silent, clean, final. In the days after, I watched him move through the weird fog that follows a toxic relationship ending. He'd swing between relief and grief. Some mornings he sounded light, like he could breathe again. Other nights he sounded hollow, like he missed the chaos because it had become familiar. He asked questions that made my chest ache. How did I not see it? Was any of it real? Did I deserve that? I answered the same way every time. Calm, consistent, truthful. You didn't deserve it. Her choices weren't about your worth. Your kindness wasn't the problem. My parents handled it perfectly. No victory lap. No, I told you so. My mom just cooked. And my dad just asked him if he needed help fixing something around the house. Like fatherhood could be a wrench and a steady presence. One evening, Lennox came over to my apartment and sat in my nail chair. The same chair Holland had sat in when I painted those two colors, blue and pink. Like a costume for a story my brother didn't know he was starring in. Lennox looked at the chair and shook his head. "I can't believe she used you like that." I shrugged, forcing my voice to stay light. "I'm not mad I did her nails." He stared at me. "You're not?" I met his eyes. "No, because it showed me something. She could stand in my home, smile at me, take my kindness, and still keep secrets that hurt you. That told me everything I needed to know." He swallowed. "I'm sorry." I leaned forward slightly. "I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to remember. The next time someone tries to make you earn basic respect, you walk." His eyes were red, but he nodded. "I will." Then he asked quietly, "Do you think I'll ever feel normal again?" I thought of all the nights he'd sounded small on the phone. All the times he'd defended her because admitting the truth would have crushed him. All the moments he chose her chaos over our peace because he thought love meant endurance. And I told him the truth. "Yes, but it's going to feel boring at first." He blinked. "Boring? Healthy feels boring when you're used to chaos," I said. "But boring is safe. Boring is restful. Boring is where you rebuild." He nodded like he wanted to believe me. That night after he left, I opened the folder on my phone with the boring name. I looked at the screenshots, the dates, the little pieces of proof I'd saved in silence. Then I deleted the whole thing. Not because I forgave her. Not because I forgot. Because I didn't need proof anymore. My brother had finally seen the truth with his own eyes, and that was the only evidence that mattered. And the next morning, when my mom texted the family group chat a simple, "Breakfast at our house if you want," Lennox replied before anyone else. "I'll be there." Sometimes the best revenge isn't exposing someone. It's watching the person they tried to isolate walk back into the light without you ever raising your voice. The last time Holland ever tried to call him, his phone stayed dark on the table, and my brother kept eating his pancakes in peace.